Welcome to a Sunday night Peston Brextra special when Matt Hancock will tell us all about the Brexit bet he made with his cabinet colleague Michael Gove. The Shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry will tell me if Labour can get the referendum it wants. Anushka Aslana will weigh the odds between Brexit happening, a general election and that referendum. The SNP MP who's been tormenting Boris Johnson in the courts, Joanna Cherry, will tell me how she'll torment him next. And in Frenemies Corner, a Tory exiled from her party who voted for Brexit delay, Antoinette Sambach, and a Tory Brexiter who doesn't like Boris Johnson's deal, but is still going to vote for it, Bernard Jenkin. Watcher. So after Super Saturday in Parliament, we have Make Your Mind Up week for MPs because after Sir Oliver Letwin won his amendment that forced him to send EU leaders a scrappy, unsigned bit of a paper asking for a Brexit delay, which he simultaneously said he didn't actually want, MPs face just three choices. Now, the reason is that EU leaders, such as France's President Macron, won't grant that delay unless MPs say what they want the delay for. So he and she probably have just 4 working days to decide whether they want a referendum or a general election and then gather the necessary votes in Parliament. Otherwise, he will almost certainly get his Brexit and even possibly by the due date of the 31st of October. So for the first time in 3.5 years, a bet on Brexit actually happening quite soon isn't completely bonkers. Or am I completely bonkers? Anushka?
Well, Robert, you may be completely bonkers, but possibly not on this one, because it is certainly very close. And while Super Saturday fizzled out, we still have a huge week ahead. Let's have a look at it. Starting tomorrow, Monday, when we believe the government is going to pretend that Saturday never happened and try to submit their meaningful vote again, because remember, it's incredibly important for Boris Johnson to have that overriding vote to show that he has parliamentary support for his deal. Now, technically, they already did this on Saturday, so to bring it back, they're going to need this man, the Speaker, John Bercow, who, let's be honest, hasn't always been that helpful to Brexiteers and has already suggested that the government motive in bringing back the vote is curious and irregular and that it is he who will give a full ruling. So what is their motive? Well, according to this interesting tweet from The Guardian's Rowena Mason, it could be that if he wins that vote, he could then withdraw his request for an Article 50 extension, which means that October the 31st becomes a no-deal deadline once again, the very thing that MPs are trying to avoid. And remember, many politicians see this as their final chance to either stop Brexit or get the type of Brexit they want. How are they going to do that? Well, on Tuesday, we expect to get the withdrawal agreement bill. That's the actual legislation. And in the following days, we'll get amendments from MPs. Here are some of them. A second referendum, the chance to extend the transition period. And here, the idea of a softer Brexit to stay in the customs union, which is interesting because some Labour MPs, like Gloria De Piero, who really wants to back a deal, but would like a softer one than Boris Johnson's, would support that. Overall, it's going to be an incredibly tight week. Apparently, the government want to get it all done through the Commons by Friday, so the Lords can sit over the weekend ready for the EU on Monday. And they do need that speed because, remember, Halloween is next week. Can we hit that deadline? Well, I'm not sure that all cabinet ministers are convinced. Michael Gove suggested this morning he'd bet our guest, Matt Hancock, that we would be out, suggesting Matt might not be so sure. Robert?
Well, as luck would have it, Matt's here, and we're going to ask him all about that bet in just a minute. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by Sir Bernard Jenkin, a Tory, and Antoinette Sambach, who is technically a member of the Tory party, but not a Tory MP anymore. Both will be terribly influential in the coming few days. I mean, I should just pick up a little bit about what Anushka said. I mean, although the order paper tomorrow suggests that this meaningful vote on Brexit is coming back, actually, I think the Speaker gave a pretty clear signal he probably wouldn't allow it. But I think what will happen is we will get the withdrawal agreement bill introduced and an important vote on that on Tuesday. So Brexit is going to dominate the coming week. If I could just start with you, Bernard. You're a former chairman of the group known as the Brexit Spartans, the ERG. Your current chairman, Steve Baker, just the other day, and the text of his speech has been released, describes Boris Johnson's deal as deeply, deeply flawed. So why are you supporting it?
Well, I think we've reached the end of the road. People are in the mood for a compromise, and we're prepared to swallow hard and accept that the best mustn't be the enemy of the good or adequate. And we've decided to cash in our chips, if you like, and accept that we've gone as far as we can. I think we're vindicated for having opposed the May deal, because Boris succeeded against all the odds and against every prediction in reopening the backstop and coming up with a very much better political declaration in favour of a free trade agreement at the end of it instead of some fudge. So we're in a much better position from that point of view. But the withdrawal agreement itself is very expensive. We have to apply EU law directly as though we were a member of the EU during the implementation period. Even though we won't be sitting at the table. I find all that very difficult to accept, but we've swallowed hard and we will accept it.
And just to be clear, if Parliament hadn't effectively taken no deal off the table, would you personally prefer a no deal to what Boris Johnson's offering?
I've always wanted a deal. There have been times where I thought a no deal would be better, but I can also see, and this is something else I accept personally, I've seen it in my family, amongst my friends, amongst colleagues in Parliament, no deal is very divisive. To bring the country together, no deal is not a good way to bring the country
So can I just
together.
actually pick up on that? I'm going to come to you literally just after this, though, from Bernard. You spent a career rebelling against the Labour leadership, but your party association never tried to throw you out.
Well, actually,
Antoinette is trying to throw her.
Well, actually, when, at Maastricht, if I had voted against a confidence motion, my party would have thrown me out.
It wasn't a confidence motion. A confidence motion means the Prime Minister resigns.
If I had voted to hand over the order paper to the opposition, I'm sure my party would have thrown me out.
Actually, I'm asking you something very specific. Do you think the members of Antoinette's party are right to be trying to get rid of her?
I'm not going to comment on that. I know nothing about what's going on in Antoinette's constituency.
Well, I can tell you that my association's been taken over by the BREXIT party, and it's been targeted by organisations for about 18 months, including Leave Means Leave, which I believe you were a member of, where people were being, online adverts were being run for people to join, hardcore Brexit party supporters to join to deselect me. So I do dispute that.
And is it the point that you've all got to come back together?
I haven't said anything about your party.
No, but Leave Means Leave. You were one of the directors of it, weren't you?
I've never been a director of Leave Means Leave.
Have you been on the board?
No, I've never been on the board of Leave Means Leave.
Have you been part of it?
My name was on their website for a period and it's not there now. But
okay,
I don't think it's very relevant, actually. I appreciate the extraordinarily difficult thing. I mean, I've been in your position where I've faced the possibility of deselection because I've been sticking to my principles.
It is not deselection. It was a motion of no confidence, but I've had very little support from the party.
Well,
and I think that the Conservative Party is turning into a hard Brexit
party. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
But can I ask you one quick question? And we've got plenty of time to talk about all this later. Antoinette, when the Brexit bill, the withdrawal agreement bill, finally arrives, and we expect it to arrive on Tuesday, will you support it in the second reading vote?
I haven't seen it, but I mean, I'm very open-minded towards it. I've supported the previous withdrawal agreement bill more times.
3 times, I think.
Yeah, 3 times, more times than the Prime Minister, and as I said,
definitely more times than Bernard Jenkins.
Definitely more times than Bernard Jenkins. So, but what I am concerned about is that the ERG have dragged the Parliament. The consensus around Parliament was for a much softer Brexit, and I think it was a real mistake that Labour MPs did not support the previous Prime Minister with her deal. And
so I think what I am going to do is put all of that to Emily and come back to you in just a minute or two, because I must now go over to my guest, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. So there's been a lot of talk today about this bet that you had with Michael Gove. So tell us, what was the bet?
Well, Michael and I have been working very hard together on trying to encourage MPs to vote for the deal. And we were talking about how we'd made progress, and he said he thinks that we will win by 3 and offered a bet on that. I think we're going to get through and win by more than that.
Oh, hang on a second, because the impression he gave on another channel, I think it was on Sky, was that you were more pessimistic than he is. But that's not true. You're saying, actually, you're more optimistic than the effective Deputy Prime Minister about getting this deal through.
Yes, I'm optimistic. I think it's brilliant that finally, it seems to me, Parliament is coming behind the deal. I hope that I hope there can be a very widespread support. It's very good to hear Antoinette is open-minded, and I very much hope that we can give whatever assurances are needed, and that Antoinette and many others can vote for it. So I think it's going to go through, because I think it's a good deal, and crucially, it allows us to deliver by the 31st of October. About a few weeks ago, I was asked, do you think we're going to leave with a deal on the 31st of October? And I said, yes, 100%. And at the time, people thought that I was a little bit over-optimistic, but I'm
mad, probably. But
but I'm increasingly confident. It's a good deal, and crucially, it allows us to deliver on the result of the referendum.
Now, I've got one final question. This has just come from one of your senior colleagues, who has also asked me to ask you whether you've had a bet on how long Boris Johnson will be Tory leader for.
No, a long, long time.
Now, I do want to move on, though, to this whole issue of getting it done by the 31st of October. Lots of people that you would know, like and respect just think that it is impossible to get such complicated legislation through on this timetable. Why on earth do you want to essentially take a significant risk with the future of this country by rushing it through?
I don't accept that at all. Actually, the rebels demonstrated that you can legislate within a week when they did that last month. And
hang on a second, but that was a really short couple of pages bill. This is this is translating 600 pages of agreement with the European Union into British legislation. I mean, it's a completely different order of magnitude.
No, I don't agree. I think the Benn Act was a very important...
It was important, but it was short and simple.
...piece of legislation that I disagreed with. But this legislation takes an agreement with the EU and puts it into UK law. That agreement with the EU, the deal, is done.
But it's 600 complex pages. You're not really comparing the Benn Acts. I think it's 3 pages and an attached letter with, the hundreds of pages of the EU withdrawal agreement.
There are always going to be people who argue to just take a bit longer and just delay this a bit more. But people have had enough with that. We've made a commitment to leave by the 31st of October.
Hang on, you voted Remain. You're not a Brexit purist. You want the kind of Brexit that is not as hardcore as Sir Bernard over there. Why this fixation on the 31st of October? If it was 5 days later, why would that matter?
Because when you make commitments as politicians, you should meet them. So I made a commitment, for instance, before the referendum. While voting Remain, I made a commitment to honour the result of the referendum. And I feel very strongly about that. And that's why I've supported leaving with a deal throughout. And I'm delighted now that we've got a deal, and a good deal, which will allow us to leave. But crucially, hold on,
please.
Leave and fulfil that commitment, and do so in a way that supports our economy and will allow us to trade globally in the future. That is what this deal does, and I think, therefore, it's we should get on with it.
I mean, just on this issue, though, of the timetable, I mean, Mairead McGuinness, senior in the European Parliament, said only just a few days ago on this programme that it's inconceivable that the European Parliament will be able to get this ratified on that kind of timetable. So we're just not leaving on the 31st of October. Get used to it.
No, I don't agree with that. I think we will leave on the 31st of October. I think we should. I think we've got the deal to do it on, and now we should get on with it. We have to sit at weekends in order to make it happen. That's fine. Lots of people work at weekends.
Given that you're all so committed to the 31st of October, should you all just collectively resign when you don't hit that target?
I just don't agree with you that we're going to see a delay. Why should we see a delay? There's no good reason.
So you're keeping open the option of a mass cabinet resignation on the 31st?
We're going to leave the European Union on the 31st of October. I'm confident of that. because I now think that there's the votes in Parliament to do that. We will then have debates, long debates, no doubt through the night, probably over the weekend, in order to get the legislation through. As I say, the legislation is based on a deal and an agreement with the EU. So whilst, of course, it should be scrutinised, it's not like we can amend that deal because the deal is already struck. What we're doing is ratifying a deal that has already been agreed.
You've made your point. We've got quite a lot more to get through. One of the things that Downing Street said after your colleague, Sir Oliver Letwin, or erstwhile colleague, he's still a member of the Tory party, but not a member of the parliamentary Tory party, when his amendment, which forced the Prime Minister to request a Brexit delay, when that was passed, Downing Street said that increases the risk of no deal. But that's ridiculous. I mean, the whole point about that amendment is it requests a delay to Brexit, so it does precisely the opposite. How on earth does it increase the risk of no deal?
Well, what it does is it made it harder for us to deliver the meaningful vote because we weren't then able to have the meaningful vote on yesterday.
Yes, but if you get the legislation through, you don't need the meaningful vote. I mean, Theresa May made that clear weeks and weeks and weeks ago, so it has no impact on that whatsoever. I mean, this is just nonsense.
Well, we want to demonstrate as soon as possible that there's a majority in Parliament for the deal.
But why is the risk of no deal increased? Why are you stepping up Yellowhammer preparations?
Of course we continue to do the preparations.
No, they said the risk of no deal increased. You haven't yet persuaded me that they have.
But I haven't seen that argument. The point I'd make is that it makes it. It means that we haven't been able to get on and deliver the meaningful vote. You know, Parliament has required this letter to be sent, but you can't legislate to change somebody's view. My view remains, and the Prime Minister's view very strongly remains, that we should leave on the 31st of October. And
but just to be clear,
change your mind.
In the Health Department, and let's be clear, no deal preparation is probably more important in your area than anywhere else. Are you stepping up no deal planning at the moment?
We are now ready. We have plans in place for all of the, for instance, there's 12,300 prescription medicines licensed in the UK. We have plans in place for every single one of them, including those that have a short shelf life. So we're ready. Of course, we continue to ensure that we will be ready, and we're going to have the operations necessary and the people on standby. In case that we have a no-deal exit. But
and what
yes,
did you feel?
But
can I just ask you, when the Chief Medical Officer, no less, Sally Davies, said that she could not rule out deaths as a result of a no-deal Brexit, you must at that point have thought, we just can't have a no-deal Brexit.
Well, we've done an awful lot of work to make sure that we are ready. But
is she right about the fact that we can't rule out additional deaths as a result of a no-deal Brexit?
Well, I've answered this question many, many times, and in health, there are always risks, and so we don't use the word guarantee. What we do say is that we have the full plans in place and we're ready.
And can I, therefore, now bring you to something which, you know, is plainly an enormously important issue for your party, the Conservative and Unionist Party. Boris Johnson has agreed a deal that has completely alienated the main unionist party in Northern Ireland, the Democratic Unionist Party. That is devastating for the Tory party.
Well, I very much hope that we can keep working with the DUP, and I hope we can give them the assurances that they need. I note that there's a lot of businesses, for instance, in Northern Ireland who have given a welcome to the new deal, the Federation of Small Businesses in Northern Ireland. I think it's a good deal for the whole UK, and there's a.
But that is a separate issue. You know, Theresa May, the previous Prime Minister, you were in her cabinet. She gave a very public pledge that there would never be an additional border in the Irish Sea, and that is what Boris Johnson has agreed. Well, so you've gone back on your government's word.
On this deal, in terms of the union, allows the whole UK to leave the EU customs union. It means that the whole UK, including Northern Ireland, will participate in future trade deals. And that wasn't the case under the previous proposal. So it keeps, by ensuring, because the backstop's gone, that the whole UK leaves. It means that the whole UK then will have trading arrangements struck with the rest of the world.
So what would you say to the DUP who say you are just wrong about that there are, for them, toxic additional checks that will be necessary on goods coming in from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, and they say that will fragment the union?
Well, I don't think that that is the case. And I think that this deal is very good for Northern Ireland. And I think that it allows for a UK-wide approach in many more areas. Now, there's some areas where there'll be a whole island of Ireland approach, like on agriculture. But by its nature, agriculture has far more links over the border and there's already separate regulatory controls in that area. So I think this is a good deal for Northern Ireland. I think it's a good deal for the whole of the UK. And actually, I think it's a good deal for the EU. It will allow us to deliver on the vote, make sure that we have that future relationship and get on to talking about the future relationship and really, talking about all the things that we need to address, like the NHS,
there is a
that we end up not talking about because we're talking about Brexit.
I tell you what, if you win your bet, you can come back on and talk about all the other stuff.
Very good. I look forward to it.
So there's quite a lot to pick up on there. Actually, this is really a question for both of you. If I could just start with you, Bernard, very quickly. I mean, look, you've devoted your life to Parliament. The last thing you would want is shoddy legislation. Truth is, if this thing is forced through in record time, likelihood is we will see shoddy legislation.
It's possible, but this is only...
Is that a price worth paying?
It's only domestic implementing legislation. If it needs to be improved, if the Act needs to be improved after we've left, we can do that. There's nothing to stop us amending this Act after it's gone through, after we've left.
Antoinette.
The agreement is set in stone.
I'm really worried because, the average time to implement a treaty in the UK, if you look at the House of Commons library briefing, is over 20 days of debate and consideration of bills.
And this is a complex treaty.
And Maastricht, for example, I think was 40 days.
Yes, but that was when we were starting from scratch. We've been scrutinising most of this agreement for a very long time.
This bill has not
bill's not been published.
Apparently, it's over 96 pages with endless schedules attached to it. And that is a really complex matter, and it really worries me that we haven't had an impact assessment. The government has not allowed itself to be scrutinised on the impacts of various options. Matt Hancock just said, talked about how it's good for the whole of the UK. I actually worry that it puts the union at risk. My my farmers in Cheshire would certainly like the same single market access that the Northern Ireland farmers will get.
But that's not in the agreement.
Indeed, something I'm going to pick up now with.
No, I'm pointing out the flaws. I'm pointing out the flaws.
You're arguing a change to the agreement.
No, I'm not.
The agreement...
I'm going to come back to both of you. There's plenty more to talk about. Delighted to be joined by the SNP MP, Joanna Cherry. So, because you have been really at the forefront of taking legal action against the Prime Minister, first on declaring the way that he prorogued or suspended Parliament illegal, and now to make sure that he honours the Ben Act. He went to the Court of Session to make sure that he honoured the terms of the Ben Act, which is this legislation which forces him to ask the EU for a delay. He has sent an unsigned letter to Donald Tusk, the President of the EU, and other EU leaders. He has also written to EU leaders saying he doesn't really want a delay. In your view, does he meet the spirit of the Ben Act?
Well, I think the crucial thing is that politically, Boris Johnson has been forced to seek the extension. So the Ben Act, the litigation that I and others brought in Scotland, and the Letwin Amendment have all worked together to make sure that he seeks that extension. The way he has
so you've got nothing to complain about. He's done what he's supposed to do.
The way he has gone about it is immensely childish, but the good news is that the EU, who I think are the grown-ups in the room, have overlooked the childish tricks and are taking the extension at face value, taking it seriously. Indeed, I understand there's some suggestion tonight of discussion about an extension till February of next year. However, you're quite right to say, Robert...
But does it not matter that he is telling every EU leader that he disagrees with Parliament and he doesn't want an extension. That is not breaching the Benn Act, in your view?
Well, it is arguably frustrating the purpose of the Act. And at the Scottish court, we took Mr Johnson to court in Scotland because we were afraid that he wouldn't obey the Benn Act. And we sought from him undertakings that he would. And he gave an undertaking to the court, so described by Steve Barclay last week as an undertaking, a promise or an assurance, but Steve Barclay's described it as an undertaking that he would obey the Benn Act, and also importantly that he wouldn't seek to frustrate its underlying purpose. Now, it is arguable that the failure to sign the letter, the silly letter that went alongside, and all the histrionics are an attempt to frustrate its purpose.
So what will you say? Because the Court of Session is...
Let's leave that up to the court tomorrow. What we'll do tomorrow...
What will the court... So just tell us briefly, because it is interesting, this. The Court of Session is going to say something tomorrow. What does it have to rule on, and what will you say back, as it were?
Well, what we will say, what I've instructed, I and Jolan Maughan and Dale Vince, the other petitioners, have instructed our lawyers to do, is to seek a continuation of the case to the end of the week, to keep a watching brief over matters. We don't want the focus to be all in the court case. We want the focus to be on what is happening in Brussels, the negotiations for an extension. Now, ultimately, it's up to the European Union whether or not they give us an extension. We will, however, draw... But let me just finish, Robert.
Please,
We will draw to the court's attention what has occurred, and it will be for the court to comment or otherwise on whether they think what has occurred is a frustration of the Act or a contempt of court. But we are not interested in making some sort of martyr out of Boris Johnson. We just want to make sure that the law is obeyed and that the extension request is made. Now, I listened to what Matt Hancock said earlier. He tried to suggest that there hadn't been a meaningful vote motion on Saturday. That is patently wrong. The government brought their meaningful vote motion. It was amended by the Letwin Amendment, and then it was passed on the floor of the House. They didn't seek it, no division was sought.
As I say, the Speaker will decide tomorrow whether...
The Speaker will decide, but to say that there wasn't a meaningful vote yesterday is factually incorrect. The Speaker will decide whether there can be another meaningful vote.
Rather indicated on Saturday, as you know, that he probably won't allow them.
Well, Erskine May indicates that that's the decision he'll make.
So we'll see, but it wouldn't be surprising if that motion was disallowed. But can I just come back to one thing you said earlier, which is you're picking up the sort of signs that the EU may, in fact, grant an even longer extension, because or rather the Benn Act requested extension to the end of January. You're hearing it might be the end of February?
The Benn Act also makes allowance for the situation where the EU offer a longer extension. And I understand...
You think that might happen?
I think it might happen, yeah. I mean, I think there,
will they impose
there are German politicians who would like to see an even longer extension, and clearly, if Parliament...
What condition would be attached to that, in your view?
I don't know what conditions will be attached, but at the moment what they seem to be suggesting is a continuation to February. But it's frequently been said in the past that the European Union would like to see some movement away from stalemate in the United Kingdom, such as a general election or a second EU referendum.
And I want to ask you about that. The SNP's preferred policy is a general election. Can you currently see a route to a general election?
Well, it's hard to see at present, but politics is very fast-moving at the moment. Our leader at Westminster, Ian Blackford, has said that he intends to table a motion of no confidence in the government. So much else is going to be happening next week. It's hard to see whether or not that would be taken. I mean, we've got the WAB coming in next week, and we've also got the trailing ends of the Queen's speech and a vote in the Queen's speech, which could possibly also be used as a vote of confidence.
Exactly.
But yes, we would like to see a general election. We do believe that Boris Johnson's not fit to be in office. He doesn't have a majority. Also, there's the position of Scotland to be considered. Scotland voted overwhelmingly Remain in some parts, such as my constituency, by 72%.
And I do want to ask you about a couple of quick questions related to that. One of the things that Ian Blackford said in the House of Commons on Saturday was that Northern Ireland had been offered what he thought was rather a good deal for Northern Ireland, and he would like to see the same for Scotland.
Indeed.
And so if, which I think is very likely, an amendment goes down to the withdrawal agreement saying that the UK should stay in the customs union, will you vote for that amendment this time?
You see, that wouldn't be enough for Scotland, because absolutely crucial to Scotland's economy is freedom of movement, which of course comes with membership of the single market.
So you would vote against the customs union?
No. We'll need to look very carefully at any amendments that are put down. But what is often forgotten is right at the beginning of this process, my colleagues in the Scottish Government prepared a document called Scotland's Place in Europe, rubbished and ignored by the British government, read very carefully and with great interest by Michel Barnier, which proposed a compromise whereby Scotland would remain in the single market and the customs union, or indeed the whole of the United Kingdom. Now, as Antoinette has said, the farmers in her constituency would like to see the kind of deal that the north of Ireland is getting. The farmers in Scotland would like to see that kind of deal. The fishermen in Scotland would like to see that kind of deal. The fishermen who've been
But if there is an amendment which broadly replicates for the whole of the UK what Northern Ireland has got, you would have to support that then, wouldn't you?
Well, we'd need to look at it very carefully and consider whether it does.
Come on, I thought you were supposed to be a straight talker.
Well, I am a straight talker, but what I've told you is this. At the beginning of this whole process, we said that we'd be prepared to have a compromise whereby Scotland stayed in the single market and the customs union. Clearly, what Northern Ireland has got at the moment is much better than what the rest of the UK is getting. But also, Robert, in Scotland there is growing pressure for a second independence referendum. We're ahead in the polls.
Can I ask you very quick? We're out of time. Quick, yes or no? Kyle Wilson, amendment on a referendum. It will come. Will the SNP support it?
Well, I sponsored the Kyle Wilson amendment last week, but it depends on its terms. The SNP will not approve Boris Johnson's agreement.
OK, that's interesting to hear. That doesn't sound like a straightforward yes for the Kyle Wilson referendum amendment. Don't go away, because after the break, we'll be talking about Brexit and a bit more with a shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry.
Hello, welcome to The Break, #Peston. I'm joined by the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, who we hear is a betting man. So, we're going to have some bets.
Right.
What do I have to do here? This is guessing game. All right, one sec. I'm animating the pen. So what you need to do is bet. These are the semi-finals of the rugby.
Yeah.
England versus New Zealand.
Oh, definitely England.
No, but you've just got to say that. Do you really think England are going to win?
Yes, I do, yeah.
What score?
Oh, what score? I think they're going to win by 25-18.
25-18. Is that... Is 25 what you thought the meaningful vote might go through for by as well?
And Wales are definitely going to beat South Africa.
I feel like this is like...
No, the Welsh backs have been absolutely brilliant. And they're rock solid. I think Wales are the exciting...
And who do you think will win the whole thing?
Well, I was going to say... I mean, I'm an England fan, of course. And I was brought up right on the Welsh border. And the
Who
Welsh...
do you back in rugby?
I'm backing England, but I think the
Health Secretaries?
The outside bet Wales is the one that they might just pick it, but I want England to win.
Here we go. October the 31st, you've got your chance. You sure?
Yes.
OK, he thinks we'll have left. He didn't have a bet to say anything other than that. OK, next one. An election. OK, so before Christmas.
I hope so.
Before April 2020
yes.
and after April 2020.
Before Christmas.
Well, you should know. So that means that you're going to go for one straight away.
We're going for one. We've called for one. I've voted for one. It's just that the other parties don't seem to want one.
But don't you need to get your deal through first?
By the 31st of October.
No question. OK, US election. Who do you think
don't know. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Don't follow US politics?
Of course. But I haven't been following it.
Who do you think's going to win the...
I don't know.
Who would you like?
I don't know.
Oh, my God. No money on that. Oh, here we go. Next Labour leader. Keir Starmer, Emily Thornberry, Angela Rayner, Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Well...
Who are you most scared of? No one sitting over there who's on the list?
Just be honest, OK? We know you're terrified. Just you know.
Is Emily bidding? Are you running? Are you running, Emily?
Oh, I'm thinking like we've got Keir Starmer. What happened? Where's the bloody M?
Yeah, definitely not Keir Starmer.
OK,
he doesn't.
Quickly, who? Have a bet.
I don't know, and but I don't think any of them are going to become Prime Minister.
And how long is that?
But you don't know which one's going to be the Labour leader?
No.
OK, is that it? Do I have to go? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
OK.
Was there any more?
Welcome back. In a moment, I'll be chatting with the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry. But first, Anushka.
Thank you, Robert. Well, if you watched on Wednesday night, you might remember that I showed you the 4 key groups in Parliament the Prime Minister would need to pass any Brexit deal. Now, we have the 2 documents, the legally binding withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, which is an ambition on the future trade deal. So let's have a look at what those same groups are thinking. First, the Brexiteers, the European Research Group, have they been persuaded? We've been hearing from Bernard Jenkins that they have. Why? Well, as he said, Boris Johnson got rid of that much-hated backstop, the fallback position, to keep all of the UK in a customs union. Although they don't like a lot else about this, including the £39 billion divorce bill. And in order to back this, they have stomached the thing that has broken the DUP's heart, our second group, that new arrangement for Northern Ireland that effectively means checks on goods crossing from there into the rest of the UK. The party's Westminster leader, Nigel Dodds, pointed out that Boris Johnson himself said, under no circumstances whatever will I allow the EU to create any sort of division down the Irish Sea. They're not convinced about that, so he has lost DUP votes, which makes this third group, Labour MPs, absolutely critical. We know they want Britain to commit to a level playing field on things like workers' rights and environmental standards. Boris Johnson has taken that out of the withdrawal agreement, but it is in the non-binding political declaration. And interestingly, the Prime Minister has suggested he could accept an amendment from Labour MPs that would give Parliament much more of a say further down the road in trade talks, although it is hard to see a final outcome that could please both Labour MPs and the ERG. Ironically, as has been pointed out, these Labour MPs had a softer Brexit under Theresa May. Finally, those Tories who have been booted out, like Antoinette, a lot of them don't love Boris Johnson, but many of them want a deal, like David Gauke here, who says he will vote for it when there is a straight vote. Robert.
Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by Emily Thornberry, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. You're very much in favour of a referendum on Brexit. How many days have you got to try and get one?
Well, good question, and I don't really know what the answer to that is. I mean, I know roughly what the government is trying to do, but that isn't necessarily what's going to happen. So they're going to try and bounce us into passing an enormous piece of legislation in, 5 days? I can't see that happening. I think that, picking up on the point that was just made, I think the point is that they say they've got enough, they say they've got the numbers to get it through the second reading. Let's see. But let's say that they're right. I don't necessarily accept that they are, but let's say that they're right. Then they've got to get this legislation through, and there will be a number of amendments.
Lots of amendments, yeah.
And the point will be, at what point does this, if there is a big enough group to pass it through second reading, will they stick together when there are all of these amendments going through?
And what's your sort of...
Sorry, just obviously the big one that you just asked me about.
Carl Wilson
one of them being about a second referendum. So if there's a majority in Parliament, which I think there might be, for a second referendum, that then gets attached to the bill. What does Bernard Jenkins then do about this bill at that point?
Bernard, what will you do at that point if there's a majority for an amendment in favour of a referendum?
Well, it's time we had a general election, because it's obvious that people like Emily Thornberry are trying to block Brexit.
But there isn't a majority in Parliament for a general election, is there?
There was never a majority in Parliament for leaving the European Union. The vast majority of MPs voted Remain, and that's always been the biggest problem.
We've all been
voted leave. The people voted leave.
So just an answer to my question. Let's say
I don't think it's going to happen.
Hang on. Let's say that there's a bill that it's been amended. Let's say on Thursday, and there's a second referendum attached to the bill. What will you do?
It's a wrecking amendment, isn't it?
Well, hang on. So you'll then vote against the bill.
I don't know what the government will do. I don't know what the government will do. The government is against a second referendum. You used to be against a second referendum. You're on record saying that. Keir Starmer is on record saying that. People like, all the Labour front bench was saying they were against a second
we are where we are, and they are not
and
against a second referendum now, which is the reality.
They've changed their mind. So maybe what he's saying, therefore, is that if there is a second referendum attached to the bill, that the government will stop the bill and then try and call a general election. I don't know. I mean, the trouble is,
what would you do? So let's just. I think it's genuinely plausible that that is what's going to happen, that the government would stop the bill and would try and call a general election. What would be the right response from Labour at that point? To support a general election at that juncture?
The trouble is there's so many ifs. I mean, the reason I introduced this is that there are so many ifs. It's really difficult. All you can do is talk about basic principles. Our basic principle is, of course, we want a general election. And of course, we want to have a referendum. And we started, not to answer Bernard's point, saying, no, let's not have another referendum. Let us try and find a way through this. And frankly, for years, the Labour Party was trying to leave, and we were basically answering the 52-48 conundrum, which was leaving the European Union but remaining close. And people like Bernard would never agree to that. Indeed, but the government wouldn't agree to it either. We had great difficulties. So we tried to leave in that way. The centre ground is now burnt away. It is one of the most important decisions, if not the most important decision politically, that we will have to make in our generation. What are people afraid of? Why not simply put it back to the people? If Boris Johnson is so pleased with himself and thinks this deal is so great, why don't they just ask the public what they think?
I mean, can I just... Sorry, I'll come back to you in a bit, but I must just talk a little bit more with the Shadow Foreign Secretary. One of the things that Joanna Cherry said is that she'd been picking up, and we don't know whether this is going to turn out to be the case, but she'd been picking up that there might well be an extension to Brexit offered by the EU of, well, perhaps till the end of February.
I think I may have told her that.
Oh, OK, in which you've heard it too, in which case. Do you understand that there are probably millions of people who are just fed up with the uncertainty and will hear that and slightly despair?
No, I quite understand. I absolutely understand. I was out on the doorstep this morning, I was talking to my constituents, and of course people are completely fed up with this. I mean, one person actually put it to me really well. He said, Brexit's what has made television boring.
No, don't say that. We hope people are watching.
Sorry. There is a substantial group of people who think that television is very interesting. But but for a lot of people, politics has got just droning on about Brexit. The difficulty is that we do have a responsibility as elected representatives to do what we think is best for the country. And as far as we're concerned in the Labour Party, our first priority has to be jobs and the economy. And we are profoundly worried about, first of all, what Theresa May came forward with, and Boris Johnson's deal is even worse.
Now, the great news is that you're staying with us and coming back after the adverts. I've got one final quick question before we go to the break. Your colleague works in Jeremy Corbyn's office, Seamus Milne, is reported to believe that Boris Johnson will get his Brexit deal.
Well, well, first of all, I do think that what you should do is talk to elected representatives, because we are the ones who are democratically accountable, and advisors advise, and frankly, it's not their job to make comments.
Whatever he thinks, you don't care.
His advice is always, listened to with great care, but what he says is not important. What politicians say is what's important. And what I say is, let's wait and see. It is extremely tight, and we have a very good Whip's office, and we have very strong arguments, and we are talking with great care to Labour MPs who are wavering on this, and, as I say, underlining the fact that in the end, we have to look after the jobs and the economy of our constituents, and that should be our first priority.
Plenty to follow up with Emily Thornberry in just a couple of minutes. Don't go away. She'll still be here. Bernard Jenkin and Antoinette Sambach will still be here. See you soon.
Hello, welcome to The Break. I'm delighted to be joined by the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry. Thank you for doing this.
All right.
And we're doing the high, low.
Okay.
Right, here we go. So we're going to do a bar chart along here. Okay, line chart, not bar chart. I should know that. Referendum result, where were you here?
So do I draw it?
Yeah, why don't you do a point and then we can add them together?
Okay.
Oh, down there.
Yeah, I think.
Sad day.
Yeah.
You felt sad on 24th of June?
Really bad.
Okay.
Yeah, really bad.
You keep moving back.
Sorry.
Did you cry?
Yeah.
You did?
And so did my kids.
Oh.
Yeah.
and then the election result.
That was quite good, actually. We were quite pleased with that. Oh, I can't get up here. Okay.
Here we go. Oh,
Say that there. Not as high as it would have been if we got into government. But,
what would that be? Is that
yeah,
when
that
you get
would have
in?
been there, yeah.
That's the Foreign Office. Harry and Meghan wedding.
Now, I wasn't terribly interested, so it would be kind of flatlining. So I'd go flatlining. But then I saw that she'd walked herself up the aisle, and it was like up there. I was really pleased to see.
Oh, because she
and then
went
I was
herself.
worried that she only walked
higher
halfway.
than the election?
Oh no, actually not higher than the election.
Okay,
Let's have the
all right.
election above it. But certainly her walking herself up the aisle, I thought, good on you, girl. And then Prince Charles walked to the last bit.
So you went down again. All right, we've got to keep moving.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by this?
What?
By
The
this election result?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I thought we were doing well, but I didn't realise we were doing that well.
OK.
I mean, I was delighted.
And, sorry, I'm going to keep going. May reaches a deal. May deal rejected. You've had a bit of an emotional roller coaster.
Oh, God.
May out, Boris in. I've only got 30 seconds.
Don't
Come on.
care. I don't
Right,
care.
you don't care.
Well.
Summer holidays,
It was good.
Labour conference.
Yeah, that was all right.
No, I've told not to.
We went up and down.
Boris reaches a deal.
Well, I think it was just... I mean,
So
it's
you've
become
not been back
increasingly
here
bad.
for a while.
It's completely bad as we've realised how bad the deal is.
And how was that Saturday in Parliament?
It was all right, actually. It was good.
So you're in quite a good place right now.
I'm OK now. I've had a bit of a bumpy time.
What
Yeah.
happens on when Brexit, if Brexit happens?
No, we're going to have a referendum first. I think we're going to have a referendum first and we're going to win.
You got there. If it's not a win,
Yeah.
what happens if you have a referendum and you lose?
I don't think we will lose.
Yeah, but
I
I'm
think the
asking
whole
you what
point
if.
is... No, but the whole point is, the reason they don't want to have another referendum is because they know that we're going to win. It's actually they're taking us out of Europe against the background of the majority of people.
Without saying anything negative about Jeremy Corbyn, how happy would you be to see a female leader of the Labour Party?
There is no vacancy. Jeremy is the leader, and Jeremy will
I'm
remain
not
the
asking you
leader
to, he could remain forever, but one day.
So, yeah, but there's no point in speculating about this. He is the leader. I would really like to be Foreign Secretary, and I would be the second female Foreign Secretary, and that would be cool.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back. I'm delighted that Labour's Emily Thornberry is still with me, but first, Anushka.
Thank you, Robert. We're talking about the chances of Brexit, the chances of an election. So I just want to quickly pull up a chart that we have used a few times here on Screeny. Odds on Brexit, that's in purple. Odds on an election, the other way around, sorry, in green. And it's about which one of these things is going to happen first. Look what's changed here. The chance of Brexit happening first has taken a strong lead, 57%, whilst the chance of a general election that was so high has dropped to 43%. Robert?
Well, Emily is still with... Do you agree with those betting odds that the general election is now likely to be after the Brexit event?
I don't know. I mean, I think we've got... we have to fight Boris's deal really hard, and there are so many imponderables. I don't know. We need to make sure that we stop this nonsense about falling out without a deal. And actually, we've realised, looking at what he's putting in front of us, is that there's a back door to there being no deal in a year or so's time. So we have to stop that as well.
I mean, I've talked to some of your colleagues who say you've got to try and amend the WAB to...
Yeah, we've got to try. Let's see if we can. But, I mean, it's seriously worrying. And I also worry, and I don't want to keep fighting with Bernard, but you know, I do also wonder whether some of the people in your group have actually agreed to Boris's deal because they think, actually, in a year's time, we can get out without a deal because we won't have this free trade agreement.
Is that why you're backing Boris Johnson?
No, absolutely not. The fact is, this is a
deal.
very, very big compromise on behalf of the ERG. And what I can't
So John Barron was just wrong, was it?
What I
So
can't...
John Barron said that he'd spoken to the previous guest and to Michael Gove and had got the impression,
no doubt.
strong impression, that actually it was worth supporting this because in a year's time he could get what he wanted, which was no deal.
By that time, we will have had a general election. And the country will have chosen a new House of Commons, and it will decide what will happen in the end.
But actually, that's a good point. You see, and this is one of the things where some people would say that Labour's argument isn't completely coherent, because on the one hand, some of your colleagues have said to, you know, the likes of sort of Lucy Powell or Mellon, who are thinking about backing Boris Johnson's deal, that his commitments to maintain workers' rights and environmental standards are worthless because the political declaration is not a legally binding document. But equally, when Labour attacks Boris Johnson's ambition for just a free trade deal, not a customs union, for example, that equally is not legally binding. If you win an election, you can have any kind of Brexit you want.
Yeah, but it's nonsense.
But isn't that relevant?
No, you're talking...
Why is it not relevant?
OK, I'll tell you. Because what you need to do is you need to pass really good legislation that will be effective.
Do that after the election.
That will be effective whether you have a Conservative government or a Labour government. The Conservatives, for example, on arms controls, are always standing up and saying, we have the best arms control legislation in the world. Well, that's Labour legislation. Actually, there are holes in it, which is why the government's been taken to court and has been told they can't sell any more arms to Saudi Arabia, because there are holes in it and they're able to get through it. So our job as lawmakers...
So you want to bind the next government? Of course, the next government could still repeal that.
Yeah, I know, but nevertheless, you know, if you take that view, you might as well just not get up in the morning. I mean, we've got to try and pass legislation that's as good as we can possibly make it.
Now, on a related point, though, because it is related...
Can I just ask her a question? How would you stop a future House of Commons changing the legislation?
No, I mean, we would have to fight it. But the point is that when we finish the day, we finish the day with the best legislation that we can. Of course, if there's another government with a different agenda, then they can change that legislation. But, Bernard, why bother to pass any legislation at all? Why not just kind of go, oh, yeah, let's pass any old legislation. We can do it in a day. It's also boring. The public find it boring. No, it's our job. Well, our job is to look at...
Another bit of your job. Sorry.
A general election should focus on on things like how we run our public services, how we're going to fund them, what kind of vision you have for the future of the country. If you need to go back to the people to get a mandate, then that should be via a second referendum, in my view.
OK, but I now want to pick up on a related point, which is you want to persuade a number of your colleagues who are thinking about voting for Boris Johnson's deal that they are wrong. Do you think your party should be as severe as Boris Johnson was on Antoinette? She was thrown out of the Tory party for voting for the Benn Act. Do you think your colleagues should be thrown out if they vote for this Boris Johnson Brexit?
I think that our whipping operation this weekend was really quite effective, and I think that it proves that you don't have to be uber macho to be effective, actually. There are ways and ways that you can persuade people and you can talk to people.
But if it comes to the crunch, should this be an issue about whether you could continue to be a Labour MP?
I think that there will be a number of crunch votes. We are getting to the crunch, I understand that. And, you know, we have had a difficult management job over the last couple of years because we've had some people who didn't want to vote for Article 50 on the one hand. We've had other people, you know, at the other end who want to now vote for Boris Johnson's deal. So we have had a management job, of course we have.
Annoyingly... We're out of time, apparently. It's an amazingly lively show. We're back at our usual time on Wednesday night, where we'll have a better idea, I hope, of when and whether Boris Johnson will actually get his Brexit deal. See you then.